Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Albany. My name is Dick Dana and I am the service associate today. Before we begin, those on Zoom should please check to make sure your microphone is muted. You can also turn off the camera or if your image is potentially distracting. Please also be mindful of your speech while on Zoom, as microphones can accidentally become unmuted. To access that, find the CC option on your Zoom toolbar and select the up arrow to choose your setting. Thanks so much for your cooperation. This morning, we welcome to our pulpit our own Erik vonHausen. He has a bachelor's degree in Theology and Psychology from Gordon College. But the best lessons he has learned have come from 51 years of constantly screwing up, as he puts it, and trying to learn from his mistakes. He is currently living his best life with his husband, Todd, dog, Rocco, and 2 cats, Gala and Squirrelly Girl. He grew up with an obsession to find out what he was going to do and who he was going to be. The only thing he figured out early in life was that he is called to be a peacemaker. Welcome, Erik.
Good morning. We'll begin with these words. This is now the time of transition, from ordinary time to sacred time to check in with your body, to collect your attention, to be present in this moment. Let this moment be separated from yesterday and tomorrow. May this space become a sanctuary for the next hour, to experience images, sounds, and music, songs, poetry, and prose that will lift your heart, broaden your mind, and move you to do justice in this world, in the service of building beloved community. May this service be holy time for each of us that joins us together in the celebration of life. Our prelude this morning is Imagine by John Lennon, arrangement by Mac Huff, musicians Raina Rosette and Chris Jensen. Please join in the chalice lighting. The words will be shown on the screen. Welcoming all free seekers of truth and meaning, we gather to excite the human spirit, to inspire its growth and development, and to respond morally and ethically to a troubled world, and to sustain a vital and nurturing religious community. Next, we'll sing a unison song, Shalom Havarim, traditional Hebrew round, musicians Albany UU and UU Catskill Joint Virtual Choir.
Hi everybody, it's Elizabeth Baldus, Acting Director of Religious Education here at Albany UU. Our story this week is Old Joe and the Carpenter, an Appalachian tale of building bridges. This story was written by Pleasant L. Despain. Old Joe lived way out in the countryside, and he had one good neighbor. They'd been friends all their lives, and now that their spouses were buried and their children raised, all they had left were their farms and each other. But for the first time, they'd had an argument. It was over a stray calf that neither one really needed. It seemed as though the calf was found on Joe's neighbor's land, and so he claimed it as his own. But old Joe said, no, that calf has the same markings as my favorite cow, and I recognize it as being mine. Well, they were both a bit stubborn, and so they just stopped talking to each other. It seemed that a dark cloud had settled over Joe, until there came a knock on his door 1 week later. He wasn't expecting anybody that morning, and as he opened the door, he saw a young woman who had a box of tools on her shoulder. She had a kind voice and dark, deep eyes, and she said, I'm a carpenter and I'm looking for a bit of work. Maybe you'd have some small jobs that I can help with. Old Joe brought her into the kitchen and sat her down and gave her some stew that he had on the back of the stove. There also was home-cooked bread, fresh churned butter, and homemade jam. While they were talking and eating, Joe decided that he liked this young carpenter, and he said, I do have a job for you. Look right there through my kitchen window. See that farm over there? That's my neighbor's place. And you see that creek running down right there between our property lines? That creek, it wasn't there last week. My neighbor did that to spite me. He took his plow up there and he dug a big old furrow from the upper pond and flooded it. Well, I want you to do one better. Since he wants us divided that way, you go out there and build me a fence, a big tall fence, so I won't even have to see his place anymore. And the carpenter said, well, if you have the lumber and the nails, I got my tools, and I'll be able to build something that you'll like. Joe had to go to town to get some supplies, so he hitched up the wagon and showed the carpenter where everything was in the barn. The carpenter carried everything she needed down to the creek and started work. The carpenter's work went smooth and fast. She did her measuring and her sawing and her nailing. It was about sunset when old Joe returned, and the carpenter had finished her work. When old Joe pulled up in that wagon, his eyes opened wide and his mouth fell open. There wasn't a fence there at all. It was a bridge going from one side of the creek to the other. It had handrails and all, a fine piece of work, and his neighbor was just starting to cross the bridge with his hand stuck out, and he was saying, Joe, you're quite a fellow to build this bridge. I'd have never been able to do that. I'm so glad we're going to be friends again. And Joe, he put his arms around his neighbor and said, oh, that calf is yours. I've known it all the time. I just want to be your friend too. About that time, the carpenter started putting her tools in the box and then hoisted it onto her shoulder and started to walk away. And Joe said, wait, come on back, young carpenter. I want you to stay on. I got lots of projects for you. The carpenter just smiled and said, I'd like to stay on, Joe, but you see, I can't. I got more bridges to build. So she walked on, and there ends my tale.
Now is the time for children and youth from pre-K through 8th grade to go to their Sunday morning religious groups. Please refer to the sign in the lobby if you are not sure where your child belongs. Children can be picked up after the service is over. Thank you.
And now we welcome our viewers from Facebook who will be joining us for our service. For those who just joined us, my name is Dick Dana, and I am your service associate today. And We welcome to our pulpit Erik vonHausen, who is a member of our congregation. He is a Wellspring facilitator and one of our pastoral care associates.
Experience Connection by Peter Morales. What does deep spirituality feel like to you? Spirituality is impossible to define and difficult to describe. For me, it feels like connection. Connection to myself, to others around me, to the earth and all of creation. Connection to myself feels like deep peace, awareness, calm, authenticity. Connection to others feels like compassion, community, acceptance, and enduring love. Spirituality is not an idea, it's an experience. When I experience connection, dividing lines disappear. Inner conflict gives way to integrity. The line that separates my individuality from others fades and we become one. I find connections with my deepest self in times of solitary practice and reflection. I find connection with others in community, often in worship. All the great spiritual traditions teach this. Today, the connection with creation, with the earth and the cosmos may be the most difficult. We live in an artificial, controlled environments that separate us from the natural world. More than humans in any other time, we live separated from the natural world, the world from which we emerged and that sustains our lives. We so very much need to experience our world. We need to let go of controlling our world and allow ourselves to become one with it. We find ourselves when we lose ourselves. May we connect, really connect. When we do, it changes everything. And now for a moment of silent meditation. Today I want to talk to you about the topic of peace. Surely there cannot be a more desperately felt need in our world. Peace between nations is at an all-time low. Who would have thought the previous government administration would have strained our peaceful relationship with Canada? Canada. Within our country, we have rarely had such a divisive relationship between Republicans and Democrats. Families are often torn apart by simple disagreements about the debt ceiling, abortion, and the management of Medicare. People of LGBTQ community often experience a lack of peace between them and local governments, established rules surrounding appropriate bathrooms, and distance between them and their own families. The fragility in our country between races of all sorts, whites from Black, Asian, and Latino. It's hard to see where anyone is really at peace with anyone else. The peace I have come to speak about today is, in my opinion, where peacemaking starts, within us and with those around us. Do we find it easy to be at peace, or is it more challenging? How can we be at peace with others if we are not at peace with ourselves? This is where I believe I have a superpower. A superpower to me is like a really efficient tool that you're really adept at working with. My experience with superpowers, however, is that they have two sides: a weakness and a strength, a yin and a yang. Dark meets light. My superpower is that I find inner peace to be extremely difficult, but I have the ability to be brutally honest with others and myself. I see sharing my tribulations and failures as a real strength. If finding inner peace was like passing the bar for a lawyer, I'd be the lawyer who needed 6,000 tries to pass the bar. Maybe that doesn't make me a natural at peacemaking, but it has become a constant process that I think about each and every day. My father, like his father before him, would ask me over and over, "What are you going to do? Who are you going to be?" I became obsessed in my 20s with finding my calling. I moved from one job to the next, seeking a feeling of purpose, success, and monetary wealth. My father had found some success in business, and I felt like I had to be more like him. I was blessed with a loving family and parents who tried to instill in me values, ethics, a sense of right and wrong, but only I could find my path. I come from a long line of women in my family who have a strong sense of intuition. That intuition lives in what has been called the second brain by some physiologists. The gut is known as the enteric nervous system that can operate independently of the brain, the spinal cord, and the central nervous system. It has been called the first brain, based on evidence suggesting that the enteric nervous system develops before the central nervous system. This is where my peace, or lack thereof, lives, right here. After graduating college in the summer before I was supposed to start seminary, I went to India for 6 weeks to do missionary work. I traveled around the countryside from New Delhi in the north to Bangalore and Madras in the south. I lived with many, many Indian families, and I experienced their lives, ate their foods, and preached to them about Christianity. I found no peace in doing so. Don't get me wrong, the Indian people are generous, hospitable, loving, and generally filled with a sense that Hinduism brings them a way to find fulfillment in their lives. If I'd approached them with the idea that they didn't need my religion, but that they may learn something from the teachings of Jesus, they may have been more receptive. I was in a foreign land, speaking to people about something they didn't ask me to speak about, and I found no peace. Upon returning to America, I immediately disenrolled in seminary and put my aspirations of becoming a minister behind me. The honest truth, sorry, Dad, is that I never found out my "what are you going to do" answer. I did find out in the subsequent years who I was going to be. Job after job, and there were way more than 20. I would learn the skills that I needed to learn and then befriend the people that I worked with. More and more people would ask me personal questions. or share their struggles with me, and I would share my experience with them. I learned later on in life that my mother became a Stephen minister, which in the United Methodist Church is a version of a PCA, or pastoral care advisor. And my father, at the end of his career as a salesman, and to this day is sought out by friends and fellow churchgoers as a source of well-balanced and level-headed advice. Without realizing it, I had joined my fellow family members in the practice of peace, love, and taking time out for anyone who needed to talk to someone. The first source of Unitarian Universalism is direct experience of the transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. Our first source of wisdom is our very own experience of mystery and wonder. Finding peace and sharing it with others is how I do that. In his chapter on the middle way, author Michael A. Schuler says, "I know of no shortcuts, no alternative curriculum. Achievement in spirituality, as in science, athletics, or the arts, requires clear focus and steady application." Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh makes the point much more eloquently when he says, "The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the green earth in the present moment, to appreciate the peace and beauty that are available now. It is not a matter of faith, it's a matter of practice." So how do you experience peace? I feel it, or the lack of it, in my gut. How I change my internal state is different all the time. Sometimes if I'm not feeling well or I'm pushing myself too hard at work, it means loving myself enough to take some downtime. If I don't know why I lack inner peace, I will often use my journal to allow my inner turmoil to speak to me. I have used meditation and even found peace while walking my dog. In a sense, I believe peace can be used interchangeably with love. I have to love myself enough to get back to a state of peace. If I have offended someone or somehow done them wrong, it is only by repairing that rift that I will find peace. This applies to myself as well. Sometimes I just need to look in the mirror and have the courage to say, "Erik, I forgive you. You are human. You make mistakes. You will always make mistakes. It's okay to move on." Spending time in nature, being grateful for all you have, decluttering, practicing acceptance and contentment, it matters not how you find inner peace, but that you can recognize it and do it. For me, inner peace is tied to living in this moment. Everything that in front of me that hasn't happened yet, I experience as anxiety. Everything behind me that has already happened, I often experience as depression. Buddhists believe that a man is inherently good because he has the potential to use love, or what some may call God, to choose the path of peace, to choose love. But don't be deceived. Peace is only available in this present moment. It is in this moment that I have the power of love or hate, good or bad, creation or deconstruction. In this moment, I have the ability to act in love. I have the ability to be godly. Nothing else is within my power or control. Nothing. Life is in itself a series of this or here moments. There doesn't exist yet There, what's in front of me doesn't exist yet. And that is already gone. Control is essentially an illusion. We don't control our lives, and we can't change what we've already experienced. It's all in the now. What did Ram Dass say? Be here now. If we don't have inner peace, how can we expect to be at peace with the world around us? In 1948, the largest study of heart health was started. It was called the Framingham Heart Study. It had over 14,000 people from 3 generations, including the original participants, their children, and their grandchildren. The Framingham Heart Study findings have informed the understanding of how cardiovascular health affects the rest of our body. The doctors involved in the study were required to use a template or a standard set of questions for each participant at each visit. In addition to data about the overall state of health of the patient, they also asked questions about their mental health and happiness. The results of this large survey revealed so much more than just cardiovascular data. In fact, in the past half century, the study has produced approximately 3,000 articles in leading medical journals. One of the results of the study was data on happiness. Clusters of happy and unhappy people are visible in the network, and the relationship between people's happiness extends up to 3 degrees of separation. For example, to the friends of one's friends' friends. People who are surrounded by many happy people and those who are central in the network are more likely to become happy in the future. Longitudinal statistic models suggest that clusters of happiness result from the spread of happiness and not just a tendency for people to associate with similar individuals. A friend who lives within a mile and who becomes happy increases the probability that another person is happy by 25%. Similar effects are seen in co-resident spouses and siblings who live within a mile and next-door neighbors. Conclusions? People's happiness depends on the happiness of others with whom they are connected. This provides further justification for seeking happiness. Like health and as a collective phenomenon. Is it so hard to believe that, like happiness, being in a state of peace makes it more likely that our friends are at peace and their friends are as well? We live in a state of interrelatedness, which I believe should motivate us to seek peace for our own selfish gains, but also for the needs of those around us. This is peacemaking at its most basic level. Sakyong Mipham Rinpoche, the leader of Tibetan Shambhala Buddhism, once said, "In a speedy and aggressive culture, we need different principles to live by: bravery and insight. The first moment of bravery is building trust in the mind, which we do in meditation. When we know how to create peace in our own mind, we can transform the world." My belief is that when you facilitate peace in another by helping them listening to the calling of their soul, they become more at peace with themselves and others. I, however, as powerful as I believe I am, understand that it is only a person's own soul that creates real learning and change. I cannot change anyone but myself. I can only bring peace to me, live by example, and to allow others to ask for help. And then that help, when it is effective, comes in the form of my sharing and allowing the other soul to speak to them. Sharing, being myself, allowing my peace to shine a light is what helps create that change in others, not me changing them. I've practiced Reiki for many years. The belief is in Reiki that when you balance your energy and are at peace with yourself, then bringing your energy or aura near another doesn't give or take away from the other at all. But positive energy encourages others to be positive. When balanced and peaceful energy surrounds someone with an imbalance, they feel the need and they're drawn to that balanced energy. Reiki gave me another language or tool for helping others sense their need and acquire peace. Recently, an acquaintance of mine said to me, "Eric, you seem to be a stable person who is not quick to anger. How do you do it?" Obviously doesn't know me very well. I found out that he was battling anxiety, outbursts of anger, and a general sense of not being in harmony in his life. I shared my experience with spirituality, medication, and my relationship with my dog. Rather than challenging my ideas, he went out and literally spoke to his doctor, who recommended a medication, obtained a therapist to work with a professional so he could work with a professional listener, and he adopted a beagle. Within 2 weeks, he was telling me that he had wished he had spoken to me and gone through this process years earlier. Again, I didn't fix him. I was merely honest. And he was in a place where he was willing to act. His desperation caused him to act immediately, and he saw very quick, positive results from his efforts. It wasn't until Wellspring and becoming a PCA that I learned how to share peace through deep listening. Deep listening is a process where the listener gives his or her undivided attention to the speaker without thinking of a response or how the topic relates to me. Deep listeners focus intensely on what the speaker is saying with their mouth and their body. Often we can hear things through reflective interactions, things that maybe even the speaker isn't aware of. It's not about giving advice. It's about allowing that person to speak from the heart and allowing space for the soul to teach that person. This is why I became a PCA. Although you might recognize my gift for gab, so to speak, I'm also a good listener. 2 years ago, however, seemingly overnight, I woke up in a state of anxiety. Where there was peace, there was now panic. Looking back on it, I can see it was building over the course of 2 years, but it felt like a light switch. All the practice and tools that I had used to help me achieve inner peace suddenly became ineffective. What had become a superpower was being tested again. The radically honest part of me had to admit that I needed help. After several conversations with my doctor, my therapist, and my spiritual advisor, I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and put on medication. Luckily, the first medication I tried worked extremely well. Instead of waking up in a panic, I now wake up a little more hopeful. Lexapro doesn't remove all the stress and anxiety from my life, but it helps me to take the stressors as they come. And I have the ability to work through them with a clear head. My inner peace now requires a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor to work properly. Remember, I said that I struggle with inner peace, but have the ability to be honest about my struggles. Maybe a small part of you is thinking, but Eric, shouldn't we all be peacemakers? Well, if you haven't considered it before, I ask you to consider it now. Will you join me in the process of being a peacemaker in whatever way you feel called? So, have I learned anything really about inner peace in all the years that I've struggled? to obtain it and spoken to others about it? No, not really. I have, however, become comfortable with the process. If you ever need someone to talk to, as a PCI, I'm always available to listen and share my struggle if it will help you. To my dad, who's watching the recording of this, I'd like to say, still don't know what I want to do, Dad, but I know who I want to be, and that is a peacemaker. Thank you.
An important way we celebrate life each Sunday is by offering an opportunity to practice generosity. Members and friends support our congregation with an annual pledge paid throughout the year. Another way to support the good work of this congregation is by making a generous contribution as we pass the plate, or via one of the options shown on this next slide. If you are joining us virtually, you can click on the tiny URL link in the chat window to contribute, or you can send a text to the number shown on the screen. The examples on the slide show how to label your text to indicate the amount and the purpose or intent of your gift. We must now say goodbye to our Facebook friends. Consider joining us on Zoom next time, or visit us at 405 Washington Avenue, Albany. You can find more information at albanyuu.org. And now our offertory music is Tuxedo Junction by Erskine Hawkins, Bill Johnson, and Julian Dash. It will be presented by Randy Rosette. We enjoy welcoming guests and visitors to our service. If you'd like to tell us who you are and where you're from, those here in Community Hall should stand or raise your hand. The usher will bring you a microphone so that everyone can hear you. Those joining us on Zoom can click on the raise hand symbol, which you'll find either in the participant window or in the reactions button on your Zoom toolbar. Our technician will invite you to unmute and introduce yourself. You may also, or instead, click on the visitor link you'll find now in the chat window.
The Buddha's Last Instruction by Mary Oliver. Make of yourself a light, said the Buddha before he died. I think of this every morning as the east begins to tear off its many clouds of darkness to send up the first signal, a white fan streaked with pink and violet and green. An old man, he lay down between two salad trees, he might have said anything, knowing it was his final hour. The light burns upward, it thickens and settles over the fields. Around him, the villagers gathered and stretched forward to listen. Even before the sun itself hangs disattached in the blue air, I am touched everywhere by its ocean of yellow waves. No doubt he thought of everything that had happened in his difficult life. And then I feel the sun itself as it blazes over the hills like a million flowers on fire. Clearly, I am not needed. Yet I feel myself turning into something of inexplicable value. Slowly, beneath the branches, he raised his head and he looked into the faces of the frightened crowd. Next to be a hymn, Love Will Guide Us, traditional arrangement by Betty A. Wilder and song leader Randy Rosette. As we extinguish the chalice, please join us in the words shown on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. As Sam is fond of saying, go in peace, make peace, be at peace.
Our thanks go to the musicians, Albany UU and UU Catskills Virtual Choir, Randy Rosette and Chris Jensen. Ushers Dawn Dana, Sharon Babila, and Tammy Hathaway. Oh, Tammy wasn't here today. Pastoral Care Associates, Sharon Babila and Sandy Stone. Service Associate, yours truly, Dick Dana. Welcomers, Don Odell and Peter Brown. Greeter, Fred Eames. Office Support, Tammy Hathaway and Patience Bichette. Technical Support, Chris Jensen and Kate Pierce.